Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 323. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is just some miscellaneous action figures that I've picked up in the last month or so. I've actually been doing a pretty good job of keeping up to date with showing you my most recent action figures. However, I do have a whole bunch of Marvel Legends that I need to show you, so I'm probably going to do a video focusing on all of those guys next. But yeah, I also have a couple of little miscellaneous things that I've been picking up, and so I kind of thought I'd get that over with today. Hopefully, maybe a relatively quick episode. Who knows? I do tend to ramble in these things, but yeah, I've got 7 figures here to talk about, and some of them I'm not going to have a whole lot to say. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. This past Saturday, I went to another local toy show, which is great. They've been having these toy shows in my neighborhood, like literally 5 minutes down the road from me, pretty regularly for the past, I don't know, 2 years now. Maybe every 3 months or so, we're getting this toy show, which was unheard of for years. So, yeah, the novelty of having local toy shows, it's pretty cool. However, I was starting to wonder if I was going to continue to go, because those of you who watch my channel regularly probably know that I buy a lot of new toys. I collect current lines such as Masters of the Universe Origins, G.I. Joe Classified, Marvel Legends, DC Superpowers, Transformers, Action Force. There's all kinds of things I collect. And I'm not usually in the market for older toys, like vintage toys. There are a few that I pick up. For example, when I find them for reasonable prices, I try and fill in the holes on my vintage G.I. Joe collection. But yeah, there's not things that I'm actively hunting for. And these toy shows are primarily like older toys, vintage toys. And I've also found that there have been a lot of the same vendors over and over again. And, so I'm getting pretty used to seeing their inventory show after show. So I was debating on whether I was going to go to this one, but I do want to support the people that put these shows on. So even if it's just, spending my couple of bucks to get in the door and maybe picking up one or two cheap things, I feel I've done my part. So me and my brother Doug, we went to the show on Saturday, and I was pretty proud of myself. I only brought $60 cash with me, and I didn't even really want to spend that. I've been spending a lot on new action figures lately, and as I've told you many times before, I am trying to reel the spending back a little bit. So when one of these shows come up, I don't want to just go and piss away money needlessly on things that I'm not actively seeking. But so I took $60. I spent 45. Now, mind you, I did spend the 45 on things that I didn't really need. But yeah, I got some cool stuff, I guess. And actually, now I'm just doing the math. I spent $40. So yeah, $40, not too bad. Anyway, so one of the first little things that I picked up is this little Funko Wolfman. Now, I think this is from a series of little blind boxes that Funko does. I'm not really familiar with them. I have lots of Funko Pops, and I have a couple of Funko Soda and some of the other lines they might have done. But I don't have any of these things. I'm not even entirely sure what they're called, because I didn't buy this guy in a blind box. There's one vendor there has a bunch of these little creatures from these blind boxes, and they've got them in little Ziploc bags, and they were selling them for $10 a piece. Some of them that I assume are maybe a little bit more rare, they were asking $20 a piece. For example, they had a Cthulhu for $20, and he was really tempting because he's really cool looking. But I really don't need to get into another little cutesy line of monsters. But at present, I have some Universal Monster figures. My favorite Universal Monster being the Wolfman. And I have a couple of different versions of him. I've got the recent NECA figure. I've also got the figure from the 2010 movie. I've got a Mego style doll. I have a Funko Pop. I've got the Jada version of it. And yeah, I've got a whole bunch of reaction figures. And so right now, all my Universal Monsters are kind of crammed into one shelf in a glass case I have out in the other room. and none of my reaction figures are on display. They're currently all boxed up. But I've been thinking, like, I want to maybe get a new case to put in this room, and I was thinking maybe if I can dedicate each shelf of the case to a different Universal monster. Now, some of them I don't have enough to really fill, like the Invisible Man can't fill a shelf. Even Dracula, I don't have enough figures to fill a whole shelf. But Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, I definitely do, especially if I put out all the reaction figures. So knowing that that is something I'm kind of thinking of doing, I knew this person was going to be there with these cute little Funko vinyl monsters. And I thought, you know what? If I only pick up one thing at this show, I'm going to grab one of these vinyl Wolfmen to put in my glass case for when I do get around to it. And so, sure enough, they were one of the first tables I saw when I walked in the door. They had a little bin with all these little ziplocked monsters. I saw him there, and I thought, well, I'll come back for him. And yeah, he was the last thing I bought on my way out the door. I asked the vendor if she would take $5 instead of 10, and she obliged. And really, I think that's all he's worth. I really wouldn't want to pay $10 for this little guy, but he is cute. So yeah, I like him. So this guy, I don't know what I'm going to do with him in the meantime until I get that shelf set up, but he's small enough that I can kind of stick him anywhere on one of these shelves, and that'll be cool. Now, I mentioned reaction figures. I do have a pretty large collection of the reaction figures from Super 7, and those are the simple figures with 5 points of articulation, styled after the Kenner Star Wars figures of the 70s and 80s. Now, I have a lot of kind of random single figures from reaction, such as like Scarface or the Iron Giant. But then I also have a bunch of reaction figures from broader lines, such as Transformers and G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe and Universal Monsters. But there's so many different brands that Super 7 has done in the reaction figure line that I just can't pick up everything. And one of their earlier lines was Predator. Now, I'm a big Predator fan. I grew up loving Predator 1. Predator 2 as well, but not nearly as much. Predator 1 is one of my all-time favorite movies, but I always liked Predator 2. And to some degree, I've liked all the Predator movies since. I thought Predators was actually quite cool. The Alien versus Predator movies, I wished they were better, but I can still find some enjoyment in there. And I really liked Prey that came out last year, the year before. So anyway, Super 7 did some Predator reaction figures very early on in their reaction figure line, and I passed on them. Partly because I thought the reaction figures in the early years did not look as good as they do now. The likenesses were even softer, and yeah, so I didn't grab any Predator ones at the time. But somebody had some Predator reaction figures. They were asking $10, so I went ahead and grabbed a Predator reaction figure. This one here, he's got the helmet off, so you can see his jowls there, or his weird crab-like face. He had two different reaction figures for Predator there. Both of them had the helmets off, but one of them had a kind of a closed mouth, and this guy here has got the open mouth. So yeah, this guy's pretty cool. And as much as I love Predator, and there's a lot of Predator action figures out there available, NECA had done a very extensive line, and I think they still produce them to this day. I don't have any Predators in my collection at all. Way back in the day, I used to have a Predator from McFarlane Toys, but I always found he was kind of a weird scale, because Predators are supposed to be tall, I guess, but this Predator, I think he was creeping in on like 8 inches, and he just kind of towered over like my Marvel figures or anything. And I don't know, I actually ended up getting rid of him years ago. I don't get rid of many toys in my collection, but there have been a couple of times when I've done a bit of a purge. And Predator, one day I just thought, this guy doesn't really fit in. I don't have any other Predator figures. He's kind of this lone thing, and he wasn't like the iconic Predator from like the first movie. This was like a variation of the Predator. I think it was the Predator from Predator 2, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I got rid of him. I kind of regret it, sure. But I've never felt compelled to go buy any of the NECA Predators in the years since. But for $10, and considering that I already have a pretty vast collection of reaction figures that I hope to eventually have on display somewhere. This guy will be a cool little addition to that. So that was a nice little find at the toy show. And the last thing I bought, this one was not on my radar at all, but I used to buy a whole lot of McFarlane figures in the 90s, particularly Spawn figures. I did have a couple like movie Maniac figures, like Pumpkinhead and stuff. But yeah, I love those McFarlane figures in the 90s because they were sort of so far ahead of every other toy available as far as the sculpting goes. But they weren't very articulated. And honestly, I didn't really love the matte finish on figures from McFarlane and NECA. I kind of like the glossier finish of Hasbro toys and Mattel toys. So after a while, I kind of stopped buying McFarlane stuff. And anyway, I had kind of forgotten all about this figure, but there was a vendor at the toy show that had a bunch of old McFarlane figures from the 90s. Some of them were really cool, and the prices were pretty reasonable. One of the coolest toys I have in my collection is the Heap, which was an old McFarlane figure from a Spawn comic. And I always pick up that thing, and I'm always still so impressed with it. He's so big and chunky. He's got so much detail. And yeah, he had a Heap there for $30, which for a toy that's, almost 30 years old or so, I was like, this is a steal. Somebody should definitely pick up this toy because it's so cool. I didn't because I already have them. But I did pick up this one here. Now, this is McFarlane's version of Medusa. Now, she kind of looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon or something. She's kind of fishy looking, and she's got like webbed fingers, and she's got these kind of fish fins that run along the side of her arms. So yeah, green and scaly. Doesn't have a snake tail. She's got more like a lizard kind of tail here. But she does have all the snaky hair. There's all these kind of bendable wire snakes attached to her head. She's got another snake that's wrapped around her waist right now that can be removed. Now, this figure is actually from the Spawn toy line. There was a spin-off comic from Spawn way back when called The Curse of the Spawn, which is where Todd McFarlane would get other creators to do short little stories based on other either characters that are in the Spawn universe, like they would take the detectives Sam and Twitch from the Spawn comic book, who often don't get the spotlight, and then they would get their own like 4-issue storyline in The Curse of the Spawn. Another thing that the Curse of the Spawn comic book did was they would tell stories of other versions of Spawn from other eras of time, because the way the Spawn story is set up is that, over the years, many different people have been given the power of Spawn. So that's why there's like a Western Spawn and a Samurai Spawn and a medieval Spawn. So anyway, there was a story in The Curse of the Spawn that I think was only like 2 or 3 issues, and it involved a kind of a Spawn set in like the Greek mythology. So you had like Zeus and you had Medusa here. So the Medusa in The Curse of the Spawn comic book appeared like this. And I remember when this toy had come out, but I had kind of cooled my jets a little bit about buying Spawn related toys at the time. But I don't know. I saw this at the toy show and it immediately, just struck me. And I was like, that's an awesome looking figure. Why didn't I buy that back in the day? So yeah, I scooped her up. And I think she's going to look good either on my Creature of the Black Lagoon shelf, if I allow myself that little bit of a cheat to sneak her in there. Or I have a lot of Clash of the Titans toys and stuff. I have just regular monster toys. She's just going to look good on my shelf no matter where I put her. So yeah, a pretty cool figure. So I'm happy with that one. Another one I'll get to. And by the way, I'm saving the best for last. So if you're getting bored of this, you might want to skip to the toys at the end of this video. Maybe I should have covered them first. But yeah, I've got some really cool ones that I'm going to show you at the end here. But another figure I've got here is a McFarlane toy from his DC Multiverse line. Now you'll see I do have some DC figures here behind me. A lot of these figures are from like DC Direct from a couple of years ago. I had a pretty big collection of DC Direct. This is only a fraction of them. A lot of them are kind of packed up in bins right now. So because I had a pretty extensive collection by a different company, I didn't really feel the need to dive in when McFarlane got the the DC license and started making his own versions of those characters. I do have a few of them. To be honest, I probably have 20 of them or so now, which might sound like a lot to non-toy collectors, but considering how I have hundreds and hundreds of Marvel Legends, and so to only have 20 DC figures from McFarlane, that's a pretty modest collection. But if he does do a character that I really love, then I feel I have to buy it. And one of my all-time favorite DC characters is Batgirl, and not the Barbara Gordon one that everybody knows, but the Cassandra Cain version of Batgirl. So I have a version of this character from DC Direct, and it's a really nice figure. It actually really captures the look of the artist who did the book, like when she had her own series for about, I want to say about 60 issues or so. And so that toy does a really good job of capturing the style of the artwork. This figure doesn't look like it's really based on any particular artist's work, but it's a really nice figure. She's got this wired cape, so you can pose it and it will hold its shape. So here, I'll try and spread the cape out wide, and you can see how that kind of retains its shape there. So that's really cool. So yeah, I dig this figure. So when I saw that McFarlane was doing his own version of this, I thought, you know what, the DC Direct one I have is several years old. We're talking 20 years old now, maybe, I don't know. So I thought I was due for an upgrade. The old one I have does not stand up very well on its own, so this one has a display base, which is nice. So yeah, she's definitely, next time you see one of these videos, she's probably going to be over here. I'm going to have to find some room for her on the DC shelf, because yeah, she looks great. And in fact, she looks so good, I think I'm probably going to flip things around and we're going to do a little bit of a close-up of her so I can show you her in a little bit more detail. But yeah, she looks really great, really solid figure. So here's a closer look at the Batgirl figure. Now, just a little bit of history on this character. So her name is Cassandra Cain, and she was a young girl. She was an assassin. In her early appearances, she was mute. She couldn't speak because she'd basically been trained to do nothing but kill, and Batman rescued her. And there was no Batgirl at the time because Barbara Gordon was paralyzed. So Batman kind of raised her to become the new Batgirl, and he trained her. And so she had her own solo series, which started in the year 2000. And like I said, it ran for about 60 issues. I can't recall exactly. I collected the whole thing, and I would have continued to collect it had it kept going. I just really liked this character, and I like seeing her grow and develop. And I was really bummed out when DC did their whole universe reboot in, I think it was 2011, with the New 52. And when they did that, they made a lot of their characters younger, and some of their characters just kind of ceased to exist. And this Batgirl just went away. And so she didn't appear anyway for several years, she just kind of vanished. But they did bring her back during the Rebirth era, although I don't know if they acknowledge her as ever being a Batgirl because they've changed the continuity a bit. She wears a costume still very similar, but she's called Orphan now, and I haven't really read many of her modern appearances, but I really did love that early comic book of hers. And here is the DC Direct figure I have of her. Now this one here really closely captures the artwork from, I believe it was Damian Scott that did the artwork on that series. For the majority of it, I think he at least did the first 40 issues or so. And like you see here, she's got this utility belt, which has got these really big, oversized pouches. She's practically swimming in this belt that just kind of hovers around her waist. That looks like it, just like out of the comic book. Really cool. You can also see these fins or whatever on her glove. They're really long and exaggerated, just like in the comic book. And she's got these long, kind of exaggerated little spindly ears off of the mask. Again, just like the artwork. And I love the face. Now, this Batgirl, I don't know how she saw through her mask. They might have explained it. I don't remember if they did or not. But it looks like she's wearing just like a solid black leather mask with no eye holes, no holes for her nose or mouth. And it looks like they had taken the original Batgirl's cowl and actually stitched more leather to cover up the hole where the mouth and nose would be. But you could see Cassandra's features through the mask. So this really captures that look from the comic book with the stitching, but you can still make out her nose and lips. You can still see her eyes. Anyway, I absolutely love this figure. But one of the problems with it is it's got very limited articulation. It's got this very big, heavy rubber cape. And if you notice the angle of her feet, and I think it's gotten worse with time, because she can't stand, because they're sculpted so that she falls backwards. And I think it's because I used to have her displayed on a display base, but this big heavy cape just kind of weighed her down, and it's kind of like bent her ankles, and she has no ankle articulation. So yeah, now she's just kind of constantly at this angle, and she does not stand on her own. So as much as I love this figure, I did feel I needed a replacement. So that's why I got this new McFarlane one. And this one here, in some ways, it's not as strong because I don't think it captures the look of her that I like. Now, not to say she hasn't looked like this in some more modern appearances, but you'll see she still has that stitched up mask, but you cannot see her facial features through it at all. I don't like that as much. The ears aren't nearly as long. The spikes on the glove aren't nearly as exaggerated. Plus, she just looks more humanly proportioned. Like, Cassandra was supposed to be quite young. I don't remember how young exactly, but I want to say 15 or 16. And I kind of liked that they drew her so she looked like she was small and, just not fully developed. This figure here, she's got these really long, womanly legs, and it just doesn't really match the look I remember for Cassandra. But, it's been several years since she was first introduced in like the late 90s, so it would make sense that maybe she's grown up a little bit. And so I think this figure is great. I don't really have any complaints about it. It's just maybe not the way I would have chosen to design it myself, but there's nothing wrong with it. The proportions look good, and the mask looks good. I love this cape. The soft goods cape, it doesn't weigh her down like the other one does. And it's got that cool wire so you can, really put it out there. Very, very cool. The belt doesn't float around quite like the other one does, but this one's got a nice, sleek design to it. She does have a couple of accessories. She has her little cable gun here, so you can fit this into her hands. And there you go. Now she can swing from building to building with her little grappling hook, which is pretty cool. And then she also has a batarang. So I don't know if she holds on to this all that well, but you can put the batarang in her hand there as well. And you'll notice she's got double jointed elbows, double jointed knees. So that means she has a really good range of movement. You can really kind of kick her legs back really far. So yeah, really posable. Great sculpt. Right amount of accessories. She's got a display stand, which I appreciate. So yeah, this is a really awesome figure. McFarlane knocked it out of the park. Very, very pleased with her. So there you go. That's Cassandra Cain Batgirl. Now another figure I've got here that's really impressive is a Street Fighter figure. Now, I'm a casual Street Fighter fan. Like probably most guys my age, I grew up playing it. I don't consider myself to be a big video game guy, but I guess I was when I was a teenager. Everybody was, and Street Fighter was one of those games that like everybody that owned a system owned Street Fighter, and everybody had their own, their favorite character from the game. And yeah, you just play it to death. I'm just kind of messing around with this guy right now. I'm trying to get him back in his default mode before I show it to you. But anyway, Jada Toys has been doing these really nice Street Fighter figures. And I kind of promised myself I wasn't going to go deep into this line because as much as I liked the property when I was a teenager, it's not something that I've really stuck with over the years. But anyway, I do have a couple of favorite characters from Street Fighter. And when I saw these toys and I saw reviews from other YouTube channels about the quality of these things and how fun they were to play with, I thought, okay, well, as soon as they do one of the characters that I'm a big fan of, I've got to check it out. So last year they put out Chun-Li, and I picked up that figure, and it absolutely delivered. She had alternate heads, alternate hands. She had little blast effects for when she does her like kind of crazy rapid kick, and it came with a little display base so you could display her in mid kick and she wouldn't lose her balance. The sculpting was really nice. It had that kind of nice, glossy, bright colored plastic that I mentioned I like from some of the bigger toy companies. Just really, really cool. And she made my best of the year list last year. So a couple of months ago, another one of my favorite Street Fighter characters that I often used when I played the game was Dhalsim. I don't know if I'm saying his name quite right, but I think it's Dhalsim. Anyway, Dhalsim went up for pre-order, and I pre-ordered one from Big Bad Toy Store, and I've been waiting months and months and months for him to show up. However, in the months since I bought him, I have had to kind of rethink my collecting a little bit, and I thought, you know what? Things are getting a little tight financially. I can't not buy G.I. Joes and Marvel Legends, but if I have anything on pre-order that doesn't really fall into one of my main categories, kind of some of these oddball things, like what I'm showing you in this episode, I kind of thought maybe I could cancel those pre-orders and let them go. And so it was only about 2 weeks ago, I said, you know what, sorry, Dhalsim, I bet you're going to be a really cool figure, but I'm going to have to cut you. And so I canceled my pre-order from Big Bad Toy Store. But it was literally, I think, 2 days later, I went into my local Walmart and they had it hanging on the shelves. And once I could see it right in front of me, I just couldn't resist. So I picked up Dhalsim, and he is awesome. I don't know, he just looks great. He moves great. Super colorful, super posable. I love that he's got these his little rings around his wrist, like his bracelets float around. His earrings are separate little pieces that I think are real metal, and they look great. His necklace is a separate sculpted piece, so it kind of floats around. He's got extra limbs. He's got an extra head. He's got a little display base. A lot of cool stuff in his package. He came in a really cool box. All the Street Fighter figures do, but they come in boxes that look like little arcade cabinets. Really cool too. If I was somebody that kept my toy boxes, I would definitely keep that one. Unfortunately, I had to scrap it. But anyway, this is another figure that's really cool, so I think I want to show you him in a little bit more detail. So we're going to flip him around and take a closer look at him. So here's a closer look at Dhalsim. And yeah, so great sculpt on that face. He just looks super stern and serious, and the paint job is really nice. And look at those earrings. Like, see those metal earrings, and they're actually separate pieces, so you can kind of move them around. Put them out to the side. I don't have any nails, so it's hard for me to move them, but there you go. You see that moving a little bit. So yeah, and he's got the butterfly joints here, so that means he can bring his arms kind of into his chest. He's got double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, no pins. So again, you can get a really nice range of movement there. He's got the rocker ankles, ball joint on the torso, ball jointed head, double jointed, so he's got a joint on his neck as well as the head. So he's got all the movement you would want. He just looks great. So you can get him in all kinds of crazy poses, just as is. You can see he's got little, holes there on his feet, so you can put him on a display stand. Now he does come with a display stand, but it's not. It does not have peg holes, so it doesn't really work with his feet. But there's probably lots of generic stands out there that you can put him on. But anyway, yeah. So it looks incredible. I'll show you some of the extra parts he comes with, because this is what really makes this figure great. So he has a couple of spare hands. So these hands here are just these kind of gripping hands, which, if I remember correctly, when you start a fight with him, he's kind of got his battle stance. He kind of has his hands out in this kind of claw formation. So that's really cool that you can give him those hands, or you can kind of give him these karate chop hands that he's got with him. And then the head, he's got this extra head sculpt where he's like yelling, and that just looks great. So again, it's got the separate metal earrings on him, and just got a lot more attitude. Really, really cool. But if you recall, and I'm sure that you do, that these Street Fighter characters, they all had their own unique moves. Like Blanca could electrify himself, and this guy here, his move was that he had stretchy limbs. So he would kind of like meditate, and he would float, and then his limbs would turn into elastics like Mr. Fantastic, and he could punch in the face from across the screen. This guy has got extra arms and extra legs to recreate that feature. So you just pop his arm off at the joint like so. And this is what I was wrestling with off screen earlier because I had his extra limbs on. So here you go. Here's an extra limb. You see it all outstretched like that. And you just plug it in like so. And there you go. Now he's got this extra arm and it is wired. So you can do all kinds of poses with that. And yeah, it's super cool because it's just like out of the video game where he can now sucker punch it from way over here. So he has got 2 arms like that. And he also has the legs. So how cool is that? So his legs, you just pop them out like so. Put them in. And there you go. Now you've got this long, stretchy, bendy leg. It's one of the coolest action features I've seen in a long time. Just really, really great. So yeah, I almost didn't buy this guy. I wanted to, but I canceled my pre-order. I'm so glad I was able to kind of pick this guy up, as much as it, hurts my wallet. And this guy was not expensive. He was relatively cheap. He was a pretty standard. Here in Canada, he was $29.99. That's cheaper than like Marvel Legends. And yeah, so he's affordable. I'm glad I picked him up because he really is incredible, and I think he's definitely got a good chance of being on my best of the year list. Because yeah, he's just a ton of fun. So there you go. There's Dhalsim. I almost forgot to show you his display base. So the one other thing he comes with is this little clear stand with this little thing here. It's got a couple of points for articulation, so you can move it around to how you want it. But basically, what that thing there does is it's something that you can like rest his foot on, so you can display him on your shelf, either kicking or punching, and he holds the pose. Because normally you could never get him to stand like that. If you had him on just a little circle base with a peg in his foot, I'm sure he would still topple over. The weight of this would, pull his leg forward. So the fact that they give you this little piece here is really great, so that he can hold his pose. So again, very, very cool. Okay, so the last couple of figures that I want to show you, they are from Four Horsemen Studios. Now, if you're not familiar with them, these guys were sculptors that had used to work for all the big toy companies, worked on some of their lines like Masters of the Universe, and then they went off and started their own toy company, and they started their own original toy lines. Started with Mythic Legions. Well, actually, they didn't start there. They did a couple other smaller lines like Gothropolis and stuff. But Mythic Legions is their big line that has really taken off. And they've recently started Cosmic Legions. So Mythic Legions is kind of like swords and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons type of stuff. Cosmic Legions is more science fiction stuff. And these guys make some of the nicest looking action figures out there. I have, again, a pretty humble collection, partly because they're expensive, and partly because, as cool as they are, I tend to want to collect things that I have nostalgic ties for, things from my childhood, like Masters of the Universe, like DC superheroes. And these Mythic Legions, it's a completely original idea, all new characters. So they've created a pretty in-depth lore with their Mythic Legions world called Mythos. And so yeah, every now and again, I usually buy like maybe 1 or 2 figures from every wave, but there's just no way I could keep up with it because it's gotten very expansive. Anyway, I do my best to try and not buy Mythic Legions from the Four Horsemen. But they also have a sub-line of figures called Figura Obscura. And these are characters that are done in the same Mythic Legions style. They often share some of the same parts from the Mythic Legions line, but they're not really tied to any particular mythology. They're just kind of like one-off figures. And the first bunch of them were all tied to a particular holiday. So the first ever Figura Obscura character they released was the Krampus, and he came out at Christmas time, and I bought him, and he is an awesome figure. I love him, and he sold out really quickly. And the thing with these figures is the Four Horsemen have said they're not gonna like go back to the well and reproduce these things to make a second wave. But what they have done is they'll re-release it again with like a different paint job. So the Krampus I got was all black. They later released an all red version of the Krampus, which is also really cool. But yeah, if you missed out on that black Krampus from the original pre-order, you were kind of out of luck. And then the next one they did was the Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman was amazing. That was like 2 years ago. came with the horse, came with the different pumpkin heads and all this stuff. I bought that one, loved it. The problem with these is, like I said, they're not cheap and they come out of nowhere. You have very little notice when they're going to drop a Figura Obscura character. It's like sometimes a matter of days. They'll say, like, this Friday, a new figure is dropping. Be ready at noon to buy it. So that's what happened to me with the Headless Horseman. I was able to get one. It sold out really quickly. Then they released it again, but instead of orange flames on the pumpkin and on the horse's hooves and stuff, they gave it kind of this green mystical glow, I guess. So again, it's still cool. I prefer the first version. Since then, they've done Santa Claus, which I did not buy, and that might sound lame, but their Santa Claus was actually really cool. It wasn't like the Coca-Cola Santa Claus. It was a much more classic St. Nicholas, very detailed action figure. Then they did Jacob Marley from A Christmas Story. Again, I didn't buy that one. That might also sound kind of goofy, but when you see the figure, you're like, holy shit, that looks awesome. It's got all these real metal chains on them, and it looks really, really cool. They've done a couple other ones that I did not buy. They did like the Monkey King, and they did, what was it, the Red Mask of Death or something. And these figures are all really cool. The Red Mask figure came with a cool, like, kind of grandfather clock accessory, which was so cool. I almost wanted to buy the figure just for the clock, but I resisted. And anyway, just about a month or so ago, that we got the news that there was going to be another Figura Obscura drop, so that we had better be ready with our credit cards to buy it when they showed up. And I was really hoping that it was going to be something I wasn't interested in. But I couldn't figure out what it was because there was no holiday. Usually these things are associated with a holiday, so it wasn't going to be a Christmas figure or an Easter figure or anything, or a Halloween figure. So I wasn't sure what to expect. Anyway, when I saw what it was, I was like, shit, because this is awesome and I have to buy it. I wasn't planning on spending this money, but I have no choice. Anyway, I have always thought like the like Egypt and all the imagery associated with Egypt was cool. My wife loves that stuff. She always wanted to be like an archaeologist. She's always wanted to visit the pyramids. So she's got lots of books and decor and everything around that kind of Egyptian theme. So that's a passion that we both kind of have together. And my favorite, I guess, character, god from the Egyptian pantheon is Anubis, the jackal-headed, god. And I don't know when I first saw him. I think he actually appears in a G.I. Joe cartoon back in the day. I remember I used to have a little figure of him when I was a kid. It was from the toy line called Monster in My Pocket. And I think you could get them in like vending machines, but I think my Anubis actually came out of a box of cereal. Anyway, I always just loved the look of that jackal-headed god with that Egyptian headdress. It looked really cool. So you probably figured it out. The characters they offered were Anubis. I don't know if you can see the text there in that cool kind of reflective gold. Anyway, beautiful box with a carving of Anubis there. And there's a little kind of like bio or a little bit of history on him on the back. We got some more cool artwork. Looks like a painting of a statue there. And you'll see there is another god featured on the side, and that is Bastet. And these figures came as a pair. Now, I don't have the same attachment to Bastet as I do to Anubis, but so if these were available separately, would I have bought both? I think my wife might have convinced me to do it, but I would have been tempted to just buy him to try and save a little bit of money. Anyway, that wasn't an option. You had to buy them both together, and I don't mind because they're both amazing figures. So yeah, nice artwork on the box there. She's got a little bio on the back of her box as well. Very, very cool. And these things have kind of like a magnetic cover here. So this kind of locks in place with a magnet. But you can take this off, and then you get this cool backdrop, this like Egyptian display there, which is pretty cool. And then now I've opened up the figure, obviously, but on the back you get, again, some really nice imagery. Got the statues on either side. Just really, really cool. And same thing with Anubis. You can take the magnetic box off. He's got the same image on the inside sleeve there, but he does have different artwork on the back of the box. And you see this cool statue with the jackal on the platform. That's going to play into this later because we actually get this thing just as an accessory to the figure. The accessories with these figures are crazy, and they were a big reason why I felt like I had to buy them. The figures themselves were awesome, but the accessories really made these things feel like must-haves. And I'll show you all that stuff. We're going to do a close-up, so I'll show you the figures, I'll show you the accessories, but I'll just quickly show you them here too. So here is Anubis. So you can see these are done in that kind of like 6-inch scale. Incredible detail on these guys. You probably won't really be able to see it until I flip the camera around. But yeah, just looks really, really cool. And then here is Bastet. So she's not quite as tall as him, but she has like soft goods. They both do, but her skirt is longer. So this here is, soft material, and it's wired, just like Batgirl's cape, so you can fold it up and it holds, like retains the shape there and everything. So yeah, just really, really cool stuff. So yeah, there's probably a lot more to say about these guys, but we might as well flip around for the close-up, and then we'll come back to wrap things up. So here is a closer look at Anubis and Bastet. But before we look at the figures, in the packaging, both of them came with the same little book. So I just want to quickly show this to you. So this is kind of cool. You open it up, and there's the history of these characters. So you see all this artwork that we already saw on the box. But you get a little write-up on the mythology. Again, there's that jackal statue sitting on this platform. I don't really know what the significance of that is. To be honest, I haven't read through this whole book. And even what I do know about these guys, I've kind of long since forgotten all the details. But I have seen some pretty cool Egyptian displays, isn't the right word, like exhibits in museums and stuff. So I've seen some cool pieces, seen some real mummies and what have you. But anyway, so this is a cool little thing for them to include. Some real photographs of real artifacts. Like, look at this cat statue here. That's very cool. More pieces you'll see here. Like this doohickey. Anyway, so there you go. You get that cool little book. And you know what? I'm going to start with the best accessories first. So that cat I just showed you, first off, you get a little replica of that cat. And it looks incredible. Like, this is a good size accessory. And like, it looks to be made of, I don't know what material this was actually made of in Egypt, kind of like blue stone or something maybe. But like, it has that texture to it. It has that paint job. Like, it looks like it could be a real artifact. And if you notice, it's got the little piercings there on the nose and the ears. Like, I love this piece. Got the little eye of Horus and this. Well, look at all this sculpted detail with the scarab. Like, this thing's incredible. And you guys might remember from a prior video, but I recently bought the NECA mummy and the NECA mummy accessory set. And the accessory set came with a big detailed sarcophagus and some like Egyptian like chests. Like, now I can display these things with my NECA stuff, and it's going to make for a really nice display. So that one was packaged with Bastet, and then this thing here was packaged with Anubis. And like, look at the size of this thing. Like, this is crazy. And the detail in the sculpting. Just really, really nice. Now, this thing came in 3 pieces. So there was the bottom part, and then this chest, which is hollow. That's snapped on the top. And then the jackal sits on the top. Now, I'll be honest, I think I broke this thing right out of the package, which was a little frustrating, in that I was trying to attach the jackal to this thing. You see he's got little pegs in the bottom of them. There's 4 holes that corresponded. So I thought he should sit nice and flat like this. So I carefully put the front legs in, and I was trying to push these back pegs in, and his tail snapped. So you can see that line on the tail. Now, I don't know if the tail was intended to be a separate piece because I didn't really get a good look at it before it snapped in half. But just a little bit of pressure it felt against the edge as I was trying to get this guy on. It just cracked. Now, fortunately, it was able to kind of peg back in, so I didn't glue it or anything. It's kind of holding in place. But I don't know if that seam was there before it broke. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but it did snap back into place, so it wasn't that big a deal. But yeah, really, really cool accessories. Like, already I feel like I've got some bang for my buck with this stuff. But okay, what else we got? So Anubis has this staff with the kind of jackal head on there. And again, it's got that nice detail, just the way it's painted. It's kind of got a wash, so it's not just blue. Like, it looks like it's been carved. It's really, really nice. That other weird little thing I showed you in the book. So we have a little replica of that little sculpture. That looks really nice, and so she can hold on to that. It's got this little handle on it. I'm not sure what the purpose of this thing was, but it's really cool. She's got this little basket, so this little woven basket, so you can put other accessories in there, and she can hold on to that. These things are kind of strange, but so you'll notice it's got the Eye of Horus there, but then that was a separate piece from this little black display. From the little black display stand. Now, the display stand does not look like something particularly Egyptian. This looks like that could have been a real artifact, and then this looks like the kind of thing they would maybe display it on in a museum. So I'm not sure what the background is on these. Like, maybe there was a better way to display these things than on these just little kind of random black clips. But we have 3 of those. So there's that one. There's this one. So I said, these pieces, you can see there's a little plug there, so you can take these out of these little stands, but then I don't know what you would do with them. And yeah, I don't know if they're just meant to kind of go on the floor like that, but I don't know what else to do with them. And then you've got this other one. Like, look at the paint detail on this little teeny accessory. Like, that's awesome. And then she's got this thingamajig here. That's another thing she can hold on to. And she's got the Ankh. Again, there's a really nice sculpted detail in there and a nice little wash to bring that out. These I really love. So these are the canopic jars. And these are the jars that held the organs when you mummified somebody. And you would store their important organs in these jars. And as I mentioned earlier, my wife is super into this Egyptian stuff. And for Christmas last year, I actually got her some canopic jars. Now, not real ones, not ancient ones or anything, but I got her these really nice replicas that I got from Egypt, carved out of stone. And so, yeah, I think mine are actually nicer than hers, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's really, really cool. So you get the 4 canopic jars with the different god heads on them. So there's this guy. And lastly, we've got the one with Anubis himself on there. Very, very cool. Lots of detail on these things. They look great. Now, there is a whole bunch of hands. I should say both these characters came with extra hands. There's like so many of them here. Like, I'm not going to show you them all, but yeah, you've got gripping hands, open hands. That's just one character's hands. The other character, I've got a whole Ziploc bag full of extra hands. Another cool thing is that both characters have extra feet. You'll notice that both these characters have kind of animal feet right now. So the clawed cat feet. But if you prefer, you can give them human feet. So I've got the big feet for Anubis and the little feet for Bastet. Now I prefer them with the animal feet myself. And then the last thing they have, which is also really cool, and I'm not sure how I want to display them. We'll take a closer look at the heads that I have on them in a moment. But there are 3 alternate heads for Bastet and 2 alternate heads for Anubis. So let's bring him up here for a second. So with this guy, you'll see he's got kind of almost as if he was a real living dog. So he's got this kind of realistic head sculpt, which I quite like. And this is the head that came on him in the packaging. And then you have another head here where it's like the same head sculpt, but he's barking. Lots of nice detail in there in the mouth and everything. So that's very cool. So you could choose to display him with that. But then this other one he has, which is also really cool, and this is my wife's favorite. It's this more like statue-esque type of head. This one matches more closely with the jackal thing back here. So that looks like something that you would have carved, and that makes him look, not necessarily like a biological creature. And, so I think my wife likes this because this is probably more, I guess, accurate. Like if you saw an Anubis statue or something, this one here is a little bit more fantasy. But, yeah, I like them both. It's hard to know which one to go with. And then with Bastet, so here she's got kind of the statue head here. So this is not really the real world head. And it's got nice little separate metal earrings too, just like Dhalsim. So she's got that head, and then she has it again. This is the same head, but you'll notice it's got a nice smooth back, which is different than all the heads that Anubis had. Anubis has this kind of block in the back because it has to plug into this headdress thing that he's wearing. Now with Bastet, looks to me like you have the option to take the headdress off. So if you want to give her this head without the extra headdress, you could do that. This one here, I'm sure, has the plug in the back, so it plugs into the headdress. So otherwise, those are basically the same. And then she has the realistic head. So this here would be more if she was like a biological creature. Still kind of a blue cat. But yeah, it's got just the sculpt there. You can tell this would be more like a living, breathing creature. So this one has a peg in the back if you want to put it with the headdress, and then it has like the same head without the peg. So if you want to display it without the headdress. So those are all the accessories these guys come with. So it is a ton of cool stuff. Now as for the figures themselves, let's take a closer look. So we've already kind of looked at this guy's head, but I just want to look at all the detail, all the different paint apps and the paint washes that bring out the detail. For his whole costume, like there was so much attention to detail here. It's really incredible. Like he's got stuff under stuff. The big blue scarab on his belt buckle there. The claws look really great. Like this is just an awesome figure. Definitely contenders for best of the year for me. Now, if there is one complaint you can kind of make about these figures, is that the Four Horsemen's, like the kind of the sculpt they use, their basic design for figures, some people find it to be a little out of date because you'll notice with his elbows that is a single joint, whereas all the other figures I showed you, like Batgirl and Dhalsim, have double jointed elbows. And the knees, he's got a single jointed knee, which means he can kick his leg back about this far, but he could never kick himself in the butt because he doesn't have that extra movement. So some people kind of harp on these Mythic Legions and these Figura, Obscura figures for not having enough articulation. But I don't buy these figures to play with. I don't really put them in dynamic poses. I like them on my shelf to look rather static. So I don't like statues. I like to buy toys that I know have articulation and that I can move around, but I don't need them to move around a ton. I'm not a stickler for articulation. These guys move enough for me. However, I'm not going to move them too much for you right now, because even though I've had these figures for a while, I have not taken the opportunity to take a hairdryer to them and move every single joint, which is what I would recommend, because they are kind of stiff. Like if I'm trying to move his arm to the side, it does not want to go. Like you really have to kind of work these things slowly to make sure you don't break them. Now they're not particularly breakable, but initially, yeah, the joints are sometimes a little stiff. That happens with these smaller run action figures from these like smaller companies. So when you get a Four Horsemen figure or an Action Force figure from Valaverse, it is recommended that you either soak them in warm water, which I would not recommend for these guys because of the soft goods. But yeah, taking a hairdryer to them usually does the trick, and I have not done that. So I'm not really going to show you how well they articulate. That's the reason I'm not swapping out their heads right now too, because I don't want to risk breaking any pegs or anything. But yeah, they're really nice, and I have lots of other figures from the Four Horsemen, and they're all really nice, and they don't break for the most part. And you got to be careful if you have really small pieces, something like this skinny, or the tail on the jackal statue. Yeah, you got to be careful with that stuff. But I think once you heat these up, they should be okay. And who knows, maybe if I had heated up the jackal statue before I had tried to connect it, it might have been okay too. I just didn't think that needed it. But anyway, that's my fault. Anyway, this figure here, again, tons of nice detail. When you look at that, all that sculpting around her neck. Her belt buckle as well, so that matches this knee. And then so soft goods here. So they both have it, but it's easier to show on her. So this thing here. Oh, by the way, both their tails are bendy. So they've kind of got wires, sort of like Dhalsim's legs, so you can pose the tail. And then the skirt piece here, if you want it to be blowing up because of the wind or something, this thing here, you want it wind swept to the side, you can do that, and it holds its position. So yeah, all this is wired, same as on Anubis. So yeah, just really great sculpting on all that like woven material on her belt there, the wrappings. Like these guys are just incredible. Really, really nice work. And as much as I love them, I really hope that I don't have to buy the next couple of figures from the Four Horsemen, because I really am trying not to indulge in this line too much. But these things seem to have sold pretty well for them, so maybe they'll decide to revisit and give us some more Egyptian gods. And if they decide to do that, I don't know how I could not buy them. And it would be pretty sweet to have like a whole pantheon of Egyptian gods on my shelf. So who knows? But anyway, thumbs up for these ones. Okay, so that was the last of my new miscellaneous figures. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please leave me comments below. All that stuff really helps the channel. And oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about the toy show that I went to. You people that watch regularly know that I often have a co-host that does these shows with me, Chad. Now, when I started doing this YouTube channel, I did not know Chad. Chad actually started out as somebody that was just commenting on my action figure Instagram and commenting on my videos. And from there, I found out he was local, and we became friends. And now we're like best buddies, and we hang out all the time. Anyway, there's another guy who comments on the channel, Scott, and I found out he was local too, and I met him at the toy show. So that was very cool. So Scott, if you're watching, and I assume you are, he seems to watch all the episodes, and hopefully you've made it right to the very end. I meant to shout you out much earlier, but I forgot to, so I'm doing it now. So yeah, it was very cool, Scott, meeting you at the show. We'll have to have you on this show sometime. You can show us your ALF collection. But anyway, so yeah, who knows? Leave me some comments below, and maybe you could be my friend next. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Ciao.